Hello and welcome back to the Red Barons Gaming YT. This is the final video of 2019 and the start of 2020. This is my top 10 list of most favorite aircraft that I've enjoyed flying throughout this year. Some are new, some are old, some are bad, and some are good. This is not a top 10 best vehicles, like based on historical accuracy or in-game decency. This is just 10 vehicles that I've picked out because I've flown them a lot and I just thoroughly enjoy them. As I said, some are new, some just arrived in this last patch and I ground them out and just thoroughly enjoyed them. So, yeah, but just before we get started, I'm just going to say Happy New Year to everyone who's watching this, and hopefully 2020 can be a better year, even though I did just start halfway through this year. But without further ado, let's just get into the main bits. In the number 10 spot is the Saab A32 Lamson. This aircraft was added in update 1.95 Northern Wind, which it's basically the bomber counterpart to the J32. This aircraft is slightly slower, but carries more payload than the J32. This thing has the potential to take out a base, and this thing sees fights around 8.7 frequently. It is a 9.0 jet, but that is why I like this, because of its payload. This payload can take out, as I said, one base. It also has, like the fighter counterpart, the J32, this thing has enough to, speed to outrun most of its opponents, and it's fairly maneuverable. Compression is a little iffy, but in terms of maneuverability, you can get away with doing some stuff. The cockpit is not fully modeled yet on this aircraft yet, which is kind of a bummer, so I'll have to wait and do a video on it when they finally get to fully modeling this jet's cockpit, as I would love to see this thing fully complete, as it looks very good right now. I love the two gun sight design and the interior with that bomb scope. So yes, that is why this aircraft has made it in number 10. Decent speed, decent payload, and overall a joy to fly. Number 9 spot goes to the Supermarine Seafire FR-47. This 5.3 aircraft is one of my favorite of the Spitfire line in the Fleet Air Arm tree. This thing has the maneuverability of a Spitfire. It is powered by a Griffin engine. It also has a really neat contra-rotating propeller design and a quartet of Hispano Mark II 20mm cannons, making this thing punch harder than a boxing glove at the end of a battering ram. In terms of boom and zoom performance, it excels at that. I always use stealth belts so the enemy don't see me coming until I hit them in the dive. You dive onto your opponent, boom them, make them go boom, and then get the hell out of there. And then if you have to, you can use your maneuverability slightly. It is a 20-second turn time, so it's not as good as like the LF Mark 9 or other things around your BR, but for a fast Spitfire, it turns very, very well. Very comparable to the E series of BF-109s, if you kind of get where I'm going with that. As you can see, the 20 mils make very, very short work out of just about anything that it decides to go after. And here I'm using universals. So yes, this thing makes my list at number 9 for very good climb rate because of the Griffin engine, overall unique design with the contra-rotating propellers on a Spitfire. The quartet of 20 mils are hard hitting, and it can also carry a few bombs, I believe a 500 kilogram bomb to be exact, for ground force matches if you so choose. All in all though, have enjoyed flying this thing 2019 and look forward to flying it again in 2020. Okay, number 8 goes to the Sud Aviation Vautour. This being the premium Jewish Vautour, or Israeli Vautour. This is going to be a very short and sweet portion. I have had this on the channel before, I believe, on a different one, not this one, but different channel. But I have had it here, and in terms of a aircraft, I just love it. I've had it for over, like, basically when it first came out, like a year ago, and it's fast for a 9.0 jet, can carry a decent payload. This one gets 4 air-to-air missiles, the Sharifs, and the hard-hitting DEFA cannons, the 30mm DEFA cannons, are very, very lethal to anything that gets caught in them, as you can see here. So yes, that is why this plane makes the list. Fast, hard-hitting, and just a joy to fly. Okay, the number 7 goes to the F4C Phantom. This was recently added later this year, and is probably one of my favorite jet bombers in the game. It is classified as a jet fighter, but I use it as a jet bomber. This thing can comfortably take out almost 3 whole bases and make it back to base unscathed due to its high top speed, and the fact that it's a supersonic fighter is very, very useful, as it can outrun most things, uh, barring the MiG-21 SMT that they just added. Other than that, it's a very good looking aircraft. The 4 AIM-9E missiles that it gets are very, very lethal with their, I believe it's a 16G overload. And the Gatling gun on this thing, as you see here, basically turns this thing into a 20mm wielding A-10. In terms of maneuverability, this thing is lackluster to say the least, as it goes so fast and is so heavy that it just doesn't turn. Which, I mean, why would you want to turn when you can just run up behind something, fire a missile, and then zoom away before anyone has been the wiser? All in all, this thing makes the number 7 spot, as it's fast, maneuverable in some cases. It's not maneuverable in most, but I mean, it can hold its own. I shouldn't say it's not maneuverable. I mean, it can hold its own, but it's fast, the gun's hard hitting, the missiles are phenomenal now that they've added the AIM-9Es instead of the AIM-9Bs, which this thing also carries. The bombs are very good, so if you want to take out your Abrams and you have this thing, I would highly suggest pairing those two up as they go hand in hand. So yes, I look forward to putting some videos of this onto the channel later in 2020, and yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of this clip. Number 6 goes to the MiG-21 SMT. This thing was just added recently in the same update that added the A32 that held the number 10 spot. This thing, as I was saying, will outdo the F4C any day of the week. It's, it's more maneuverable, it has better missiles at 18Gs, the R60s, and the 23mm cannons hit harder, in my opinion, than 20 mils. And it also has a very, very nice sound to them. It's like a sound when these two things fire off. It's just amazing. So you can see I ripped my wing, or not my wings, my flaps in that approach, just because this thing will pretty much break its wings in a straight line if you let it. It's that fast. This thing is probably right now one of the fastest jets in the game. There's the cannons firing. You've got the 4 missiles, of course, that complement the 23s very well. And missing with these things is rare. These things, basically once locked on, will find their target. Probably 87% of the time. I'm gonna leave out some just due to the fact that there's always air, but in terms of actually being able to hit something with these R-60s, these are probably some of the best air-to-air missiles in the game mounted on a fixed-wing aircraft. Mistrals are better on the French Tiger HAP, but I digress. So yes, this thing makes number 6 for being just damn good looking, fast, maneuverable, and the missiles sell this thing. If you don't have the missiles, don't fly it. Just get the missiles, R-60s, whatever you do. That is what sells this thing and why it makes it better than the F-4C on my top 10 list. Okay, on the number 5 spot, we have the Fiat G55S. This Italian premium fighter is based off of the G55 Soto series, which is a standard in the tech tree. There are different versions of it. This one is my favorite, mainly due to the fact that the reward benefit is very good due to the fact this is a premium, and the 320 mils make this one of the best fighters at its BR with some of the hardest hitting cannons of its BR. It sits at 4.7, so if it ever gets down tier to 3.7, you're basically king of the hill and can dispatch just about anything and anyone at will. Doesn't matter what. And the thing's dive speed is tremendously good, and the roll rate and turn rate can match some Spitfires. So you're looking at a very fast, very nimble Italian single-seat fighter made by Fiat. And I've enjoyed flying this thing for almost 3 years, 2 years now, I think, actually, whenever Italian came out. But I've enjoyed flying this thing so much that it just comes out once a day at least. Um, and I mean, it's a very good looking aircraft too. I mean, most Italian fighters are very good looking, and this one happens to be very, very durable as well. Reasons this thing makes the number 5 spot in the top 5 of the top 10 is speed, maneuverability, dive speed, weapons choices with the 320 mils, and just overall just being a good aircraft. So if you're ever thinking about starting Italy, this is the plane to use. Number 4 spot goes to the famous Tupolev Tu-2S. This aircraft is a 6.0 and 5.7 vehicle that carries a pretty decent payload of the max being two 500 Fab 500 kilogram bombs, or and one 1,000 kilogram Fab 1000 bomb. In terms of an aircraft, this is one of the best frontline medium bombers of the Soviet tree. It is super fast and super durable. It is also very, very well armed with 12.7s to defend its rear. Later models at 6.0 get the 20 mil. And the thing's 20 mils on the front, which it gets two of, have some of the best kill rates of any bomber, in my opinion, in terms of a heavy fighter. I mean, this thing will go from dropping bombs to dropping planes to the airfield very, very regularly. It's one of my favorite bombers to fly for the Soviet Air Force. As you can see, the maneuverability as well is very, very good with this aircraft. And it will keep on with most vehicles of its BR in terms of turn. So if your Focke-Wulfs who are trying to leech off you being a bomber want to turn fight with you, gladly oblige them and quickly dispatch them with their 20 mil Shavaks that this thing gets. Also, as I said, the tail gunner is very, very lethal. So don't tail sit on one of these. So the reason this thing makes it in the number 4 spot, high speed, good defensive capabilities, good offensive capabilities, and just it's a multi-use aircraft with a very good payload. Thing can be a bomber, a fighter, a heavy fighter, an interceptor, a decoy. It can be whatever you want it to be. So that is why it makes the list this year on my top 10 of 2019 War Thunder vehicles. Number 3 will go to the Fiat G91R3 Eurojet. This has been in the Italian tech tree for some time, but the Germans just got their variant now, which resides at a battle rating of 8.7 right behind the Horten 229 in that tree. This thing, in my opinion, is the better G91. It gets two 30mm DEFA cannons in place of the four 50 caliber 12.7 machine guns. This thing is a very good boom and zoomer. Has a fairly decent turn rate, so if you have to turn, you can do it. Dive speed is tremendously good. And this thing gets some payload options. It does not get the air-to-air missiles of the R4 and the Italian tree, but the R3 does get the cannons, so it doesn't really need them. Just line up, short burst, and dispatch your target. Not very hard. Reason this thing makes the list this year is because of the fact of its good armaments, decent looks, and just the fact that I just enjoy flying it and have never had a piss poor match in it. So yes, that is why this thing makes this list. So yeah, just enjoy the rest of the clip and we'll get on to the last two of this year. Number 2 will be going to the Bf-109 G10 or Gustav 10. This rank 4 fighter of the German Luftwaffe is a late war G series residing after the G14 and G6 in that little plane pack. This thing is relatable to the K4, except that this thing does have the option to be able to carry 30mm cannons, both prop hub mounted and gun pods. This one is also more maneuverable than the K4, as this one does not have as much armor as the K4, but in reality, when you're the one dishing the damage, you don't really need armor. This thing will fly pretty much like any other 109, boom and zoom, or just bomber interception. I use it for both. A lot of times, though, if I'm not going after bombers, I won't take the gun pods, and if I am, I'll make sure I have all three 30mm MK108s installed down the prop hub and the wing pods. But as you can see, these bombers here, even with the 20 mils, are not standing much of a chance to me. So the reason I picked this one for the number 2 spot is I just overall enjoy flying 109s, and I just enjoy this thing's turn rate, which is better than most 109s, and the armament loadout options from 30 mils to 20 mils, or a combination of all three. Its secondary armament of 13 mils are also quite lethal. So just because you're out of cannon does not mean that your fight is over. You can still set fuel tanks and stuff on fire with those 13 mils as long as you are using the armor piercing, immediate action, and incendiary tracers API usually. So yes, that is why this thing makes the second spot. Now, on to the final vehicle. And the final vehicle goes to the Kai 87, the sledgehammer of 6.0. How could this be much of a surprise? You heard my video earlier this week on this, and I thoroughly loved this aircraft. I have not had a bad game in this Japanese fighter since I've got it. I've not flown it that often because I did just recently get it in the last couple weeks, but it's just so good to fly. It fits me perfectly. As I said earlier, am a fan of the 109s, so it can boom and zoom. I'm also a fan of turn fighting with some aircraft. This thing can do that too. As I said in the Sledgehammer 6.0 video, this is like a P-47 Crust with an A6M20. It is fast, has a subpar climb rate, but it can get to altitude, is heavily armed with the 230 mils and 220 mils, and in my opinion is just one of the best Japanese super props of 6.0. And yes, I say it's a super prop because it does have a turbocharger and supercharger. So it is super fast and very good at high altitude and low altitude. You can see here, it's very easy to whip onto the tail of an aircraft and just not care about what that aircraft is. CS, the reason this thing makes the number 1 spot this year is because I have not had a bad game in it. It fits my style of flying. The armament is just insanely powerful. And it's just a good looking aircraft overall. So that is why I picked this as my number 1 aircraft of 2019. CS, before I go now, I'm just going to say again, Happy New Year to you all. Have a safe holiday. Hope you've enjoyed watching this for the first couple months of 2018 from July till now, and I hope that you all continue to watch in 2020 and years to come. So yes, if you've enjoyed this, please leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video, which will probably be coming out tomorrow, possibly, or whenever. So yes, Red Barons, over and out. It's been a pleasure this year, and yeah, Happy New Year.